Morning, Sajjad.
Hey Vijay, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Let me know
Great.
when to start.
Yeah. So I think 8 to 9 participants are in. If you want, we can wait for like 3-4 minutes and start by 8:05 so that more people can join.
Sure, let's start at 8:05.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining on time. We'll start at 8:05. Sajjad, I think we can start now. More and more guys will keep joining in as and when we proceed. Sounds good?
Yeah, sure. Let me give me a minute, huh?
Yeah, sure. Just let me know once you're ready.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope my voice is audible on my screen. Everyone can see.
Yeah, we can see the screen and your voice is good. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, very good morning to everyone. I welcome you all to join this session. Thanks for joining. So today we are going to discuss about different data collection process from the perspective of data scientist. Before we do that, I'll quickly start with a brief introduction about myself. So just wait a second now. Okay, all right. So myself, Sajjad Hussain. I currently lead the data science and data engineering team at Trafigura. The role which I perform at my current organization is lead the team, which includes data developers, full stack developers, data scientists, and data engineers. And we are basically responsible for doing all activities related to data science within REM globally. So I have fair share of experience into different aspects of analytics, which includes complete end-to-end developments, including the data ingestion part, data scraping part, then machine learning, deep learning, and deployments in AI ops. I have around 8 years of experience. Previous to this current organization, I've worked with MSCI, Eclipse Services, and CSIR. I've also co-founded a startup which is doing well. So that's about me. Now we'll start with the session. So the topic for today's session. So before we move into the individual topics, what we need to do, I'll just give you a brief heads up in terms of what we are trying to achieve here. So today, as you know, and all of you might be already aware that what we want to understand is the aspect of data and the importance of data, and also the importance of consuming data, and what are the challenges related to data from the perspective of data scientists. So let me be very clear first that we are not going to discuss a complete data engineering topic. We are not talking about how to become a data engineer. We are not talking about how to become a data developer, and we are not going to talk about how to become a full stack developer. Uh, we are going to learn something about, like, as a data scientist, is it enough for us to just know the data science skills, which is basically what we think is the skill or the modeling skill? Is it enough to be a good data scientist? Do we need to learn some other aspects like data engineering, like data scraping, like data fetching, or maybe model deployment, AI ops, these kinds of things? If we do, then till what level do we need to learn these things? Like, what are the tools and technologies? We are going to cover those also today. This is not a completely technical session, so we'll not be going into the details of implementation, how you can implement. What we'll be covering, the idea and the aim of this whole session is to give you a heads up in terms of what you need to do, what are the different tools and technologies utilized, and as a data scientist, what are the next thing which you should learn once you have a basic foundations in machine learning, deep learning, and modeling and analytics process. All right, so that is the whole objective of this session. So we'll start off with the first importance, like what is the importance of data engineering into data science, and then we will move on to like real world industry experience, like in industry, how it works. I'll also give you as much as possible. I'll try to give you a lot of insights into how it actually works in the real industry. I'll take an example of a project which is actually a real project, and we'll try to learn these concepts based on that project itself. So we will see about the different aspects of acquiring data, how much data is important, how to fetch the data. You will see that data is not just about just fetching the data from database. There are lots of other aspects involved in this. So we'll come to those discussion in details, and then we will see the whole pipeline, like how should we design the pipeline, and then we will understand, have a little bit brief discussion on the different tools which are available in the market, both the traditional tools which has been there in for the last 2 years or last 20-30 years, and also the recent tools which has come in the last 4-5 years. So we will see, and we will see like what is the market trend these days. We will have these discussions. All right. Now, before we move on to the actual discussions, I want to make sure to everyone that this session, I don't want it to be one-way session where I just give lectures and you just keep on listening. The idea is not to give you information. All of these informations you are going to find everywhere in a lot of blogs, in a lot of tutorials. So I'm not going to talk anything new actually. I'm not going to talk anything which is going to be out of the blue or completely out of this world. So most of the things are already present on internet. You can watch any tutorial, you can watch any blogs, they'll be there. What we want here is we want to have a discussion. So basically what we want to discuss from your perspective and from my perspective. We want to debate on this topic, like how data engineering is useful to a data scientist, and like what are the expectations from a data scientist in terms of data engineering. So we want this discussion to be a discussion and not a one-way lecture. So do not hesitate in asking questions anywhere in the middle of the session, although we'll be reserving some last 10-15 minutes specifically for questions and queries, but that does not mean that you cannot ask your queries during the sessions. So anytime anything comes to your mind, please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question. If you don't want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question. In case I miss any question on the chat, I'll try to cover that during our last 10-15 minutes. All right. Now, given this, having set this platform and having set our objectives, so we will begin with a question actually. So this is my question, and I want a few answers from you guys. Like, what do you think? What is the job of a data scientist? Like, what does data scientist do? So I want a few answers from you. Said like, what do you think? What is the job of a data scientist? If someone asks you like, what do you? If you are a data scientist, if someone asks you what do you do, like what is your objective, then what you will say? So go ahead. So this is a question to everyone. I mean, like, I need to understand. Like, what do you think is the job of data scientist? Yes, go ahead.
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Basically, see, if I'm given some data and my business partners want some insight from it, like say if I'm into retail, so they would like to know what are the products which are going to be required for say next few weeks. So for forecasting, so if I'm to say if I'm a supply chain manager, then I will obviously try to find some answers by doing some forecasting.
To find a solution for any business problem.
Find solution for a business problem. I got one answer as finding insights from the data, doing forecasting, finding solutions from a business problem. Any more answers? Anyone else?
Yeah, is my voice audible?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, to find out the meaningful inference from the data. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
Find out meaningful information. So all of you are correct. There is nothing wrong with any of the answers. But if someone asks me, actually ask this question, I say reply simply in just one word, that the task of any data scientist, obviously it is to perform the modeling, obviously it is to perform the job doing forecasting, and then there are n number of things which a data scientist is expected to do, and that is actually becoming the big problem here, that a data scientist gets confused like what actually he or she is expected to do, because he is also expected to do a forecasting, he is also expected to build a recommender engine, he is also expected to do a time series prediction, he is also expected to analyze text data, he is also expected to fetch data from database, he is also expected to discuss with the business and understand the problem statements, he is also expected to visualize and project the data in some sort of dashboard and project it to the management, create presentations. All right. So I mean, like there could be n number of definitions. What could be a job of a data scientist? But in a single word, if someone asks you this question, like what does data scientists do? I would simply reply that the task is simply to solve problems. All right. So at the end of the day, your task is neither to build a model. At the end of the day, your task is neither to develop a fancy algorithm. Your task is not to use a deep learning algorithm. Obviously, those are part of your solutions. But at the end of the day, the task is to solve problem, whatever the business problem you have at your hand, and whatever it takes to solve that problem, you will have to go through it, you will have to do that. All right, so that is the objective here. Somehow my screen froze. Okay, yeah. All right, So again, most of you were right. Like, yeah, we need to do, and for solving that problem, obviously we'll need to do all of those activities which we have discussed. We need to obviously connect to the business, understand the problems. We need to define it. Like, what do we need to do? We'll need to. Sometimes we not only just need to define the problem, define the solution. We also need to define the problem statement itself. So a lot of times, which will happen that a client will come and they will say that we have this process. Now you think, how do you collect data? What data is useful to you? You think what is the problem which you can come up, and you think what solution you can find. So you not only have to come up with a solution, you also have to come up with the problem. So you also have to suggest that this is a problem statement which exists in your particular organization, and this, by using this data, we can improve this or some things like that. All right. So you'll have to do all of these activities. All right. Now, most of the time, data scientists are usually interested in analyzing the data and finding the exploit. The middle, but the second point which you see. So, although this is the most fancy part, and everyone is interested in doing this, but this becomes not this is not useful without the other two things. That is, until and unless you do all the other activities, this is not possible. So, doing this task is easier said than done, because analyzing a data which is given to you in a very well structured form in Excel sheet is fine, but in real world it doesn't work like that. All right. So now we have come up to this conclusion that okay, fine, data scientist is expected to all of the activities and which is required to solve the problem, and what are those activities. We will try to focus on those activities. All right. So now the first question is, obviously, since we are working with data science, the data science comprises of two words, data plus science. So obviously the first thing which a data scientist should be very well aware and should be very good with is data. All right. So, and among data, the person should also be very capable in not only just analyzing the data, the person should be capable in capturing the data. Also, the person should be very capable in also finding out which data to capture and finding out which data not to capture. So finding the importance of data is also very critical here. Then how to manage the data, how to store the data, what tools and technologies used to process the data, all of these things are a part of the data scientist jobs. All right. So all these are part of your job description. So you cannot just say that doing anything with the data is not a part of data scientist. It is data engineer's job. It is also expected from you. All right. So the idea here is, most of the time while we are learning, while we are in academic mode, when we go through Kaggle, or maybe we build some projects using some given data sets in hackathons or all, those are all good and fine, but then they are given to, the problem statements are usually given to you in a very structured format. The problem statements are typically given to you in a very well framed fashion, where you have a data in the form of Excel sheet or maybe some database at max, and you just pull the data and you just directly load and you straight away go ahead and analyze. All right. But real world doesn't work like that. Real world doesn't have this data set in the form of a very structured fashion. Real world, actually, in the real world, you will not actually know where the data is. You will have to scrape, you will have to find out in a very big in a very unstructured way. You will have to know that which data to use, which data not to use. So it said, like if you want to know about animals, if you want to know how a lion works, what are the characteristics of a lion, or what are the characteristics of a tiger, you don't go to a zoo, you go to a jungle, because in zoo you will not find out the real characteristics of a tiger or lion. Maybe you will notice some of the characteristics, like okay, the lion is of this color, it has maybe 4 legs, and maybe it makes this sound. But the real characteristics, how a lion catches its prey, you will only know once you actually go into the jungle. All right. Similarly, real world is also a jungle. So similarly, when you if you compare the same analogy in our data science world, when you work with this Kaggle projects, where you have those data sets in a well structured format, when you do this hackathons, those are like a zoo, where the animals are presented in a nice cage, and you can just go ahead and just analyze. But in real world, you will have to find out where you will have to first search for the lion or tiger, where those are. And then those lions and tigers will be moving. So you will need to find out a way how to communicate. So all of these will become also a part of the job description. All right. Okay. And next thing is, I wanted to stress on this particular point, which is within data scientists also, there is this sometimes misconceptions, or I would say not like a misconception, but you can say kind of an over expectations from a data scientist. There are two types of data scientists. One is the type who believes that okay, a data scientist task is only to do the modeling part, and anything other than that is someone else's job. So maybe if the data scientist needs to pull a data, he will raise a ticket in Jira and wait for the data engineer to pull the data. I am of the firm belief that although a data scientist doesn't need to be a complete data engineer, but he or she should at least be able to communicate with the databases and pull the data, fetch the data, and it's always easier to do that. I mean, like connecting to a database is not that difficult. Even if you don't know, you can obviously Google and find out. More often than not, within a couple of hours you should be able to find the solution, how to connect any new database and fetch the data, how to write those queries in a different database, rather than raising a Jira ticket and waiting for maybe a couple of days for the data engineer to provide you data, and at the end of the day finding that the data was incorrect, and then you again communicate with the person, and then you go back and forth. All right, so this delays the time. So although maybe for your live project, for your real world production, the whole project, maybe you depend on the data engineer to do that task, but while experimenting, while procuring the data, while doing these experimentations, you should at least be you should at least be able to do this task yourself also. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, this brings us to the discussion like, okay, and this is actually a hot topic, and a lot of times we discuss about this, like whether a data scientist, if the data scientist is expected to do all of these tasks, like then what is the need of data engineer? What is the need of full stack developer? What is the need of DevOps person? So I like to frame it in this two ways. Like there is a good news and there is a bad news. The bad news is yes, a data scientist is expected to have the skills of all data engineers, software engineer also. A data scientist is actually required to have the skills of business analyst also, and project manager, DevOps, and obviously data science. All right. But the good news is you just need to be good enough. You don't need to be an expert in all of them. And I'm of the firm belief that being just good enough or average in most of in a large number of skills is still easier than being very good at one particular skill. So don't think like if just knowing a bits and pieces of how to work with databases, how to deploy your model is a lot easier than being an expert in deep learning, or being an expert in deployment, or being an expert data engineers. All right. So although it sounds a lot like we need to know this also, this also, this also, but it's actually not that difficult. So if once you make up this mind, once you are in this mind frame where you think that you should have all these skills, it will automatically come. And obviously it will not come in a day. It will come with practice. It will come with a lot of hard work and research, but it's not unachievable. And this range of broad skills, once you develop into your resume, this will make you something which we call as unicorn data scientist or full stack data scientist. So full stack data scientist is nothing. A full stack data scientist is a data scientist which who obviously has this data science skill, modeling skills, deep learning skills, but apart from that they also have average, not great, but average software engineering skills, average data engineering skills, AI ops or ML ops skills, and some sort of business analysis skills, obviously, because you not only just need to work on the data, you obviously need to connect to the client, you need to discuss the problem, you need to present the solution and convince the client. So all of these are a part of your job description. Okay. Okay. Now we'll try to focus on the data aspect, and we'll go into more details like all right, we have understood, we are convinced now that okay, fine, data is important and data engineering is a part of the data science of the job description of data scientist. But like, what are the aspects in it? Like, what are the things which we need to do in this, and what are the challenges? All right. So let's discuss bit by bit. I'll start off with maybe the evolution of data. So like how it has changed over the decade. So you might have heard this terminology, deep learning, in the last 5-10 years, maybe a lot. And at least in the last 2-3 years, you might have, like, you see everywhere, you see deep learning, a deep learning post everywhere. You open a blog, you open news, something you will see AI, ML, and deep learning everywhere. So why has this happened? Why has this, like, why this boom has taken? And talking about this deep learning thing, you will know that deep if you are aware about that. I'm not really sure at what stage you are in your course, but deep learning is nothing. Deep learning is just basically a fancy name for neural networks. Whenever the neural network becomes too deep, obviously it's not a technically correct explanation, but yeah, I mean, like, it's some form of neural network. And neural network is not actually a very new technology. Neural network is not a new concept. Neural network, I believe the first neural network was developed somewhere in the 1975 to 80, something like that. So maybe you can imagine 40-45 years back, that was when neural network started. 1990s, there were a lot of works on neural network. Still, we did not hear a lot about neural networks in our while we are growing up in 1990s or the 2000s. We started hearing about neural networks or deep learning maybe after 2010 or probably after 2015. So why has this happened? So there are multiple reasons why has this happened. One thing and most important thing is exponential rise in the creation of the data. That has been there has been a tremendous rise in the data itself in the last 5-10 years, I would say. And when I say rise in the data, I'm not just talking about like the volume of data. I'm talking about the all aspects of data. And what does the all aspects? Collection of data. Companies have previously also companies have been generating those tons of data. So the data was there, but they were not realizing the importance that this data could be useful. So they used to just throw garbage in, garbage out, not just storing that, just throwing it out. All right. Now the companies have realized that data is actually very, very important, and they are investing in it. So there has been a huge increase in the realization of importance of data. Uh, there has been lot of advancements in the terms of sensor technologies. So a lot of industries, factories are deploying something what been popularly known as IoT, Internet of Things. And then there comes with IoT comes there a lot of sensors. And since we have a lot of sensors, so that it generates a lot of volumes and volumes of data. To give you an example and a broad idea, like what kind of volume a sensor usually generates. So all of you might be using your mobile phones, and your mobile phones, you might play those games like Temple and those games where you tilt your mobile phone and the guy moves right or the left. So this is based on a simple sensor which is there in your mobile phone. It's called as accelerometer. All right. Now accelerometer measures your basically the specific gravity, but not going to the details of the technology. Just I wanted to highlight the point that an accelerometer usually typically works in megahertz. Megahertz is basically, you can imagine, a typical MSME sensor also, which is the low cost accelerometer, and will work at least as a 20 kilohertz. 20 kilohertz means 20,000 data points per second. So that is the volume of data which a single sensor is generating. Now multiply this by 24, multiply this by 3600. So 20,000 into 3600, that is the volume of data generated by single sensor in 1 hour, and then multiplied further by 24, and then you can imagine that is the volume of data generated by single sensor in a day. Now imagine in a particular factory where you have thousands of such sensors, how much data they would be generating in a day, and then you can imagine the challenge there. That is, it is not just about data. It is not just about realizing the importance of the data and storing it somewhere. It is also about how to do that activity. Because okay, fine, you have a database, you have a generated data, but how do you transfer the data from the sensor to the database? That becomes again a very, very important task. So what is the kind of data? You have to understand that your decisions, your tools and technology selection, all of these are going to depend on these factors. What is the frequency of the data which you are receiving? What is the type and characteristics of the data? We'll come later on. I'm going to come to that aspect, like what are the different types of data which you can have. Typically we usually know that these two types, one is structured data and unstructured data, but we'll go into a little bit more details what comes under structured data, what comes under unstructured data, and there is other classes also of data apart from just having structured data and unstructured data. Okay. Next thing which we need to discuss is not only just storage of the data. Once, even if you have the data, what to do with that data? Now, what to do with that data, you need to think in terms of processing the data, how you are going to process those data. So there has been again a lot of advancement in the processing frameworks itself. So like big data has come in the last few years. So big data has, I mean, like although initially the something called as MapReduce came into picture, which was called as revolutionary, which has increased the compute time exponentially. But nowadays, even MapReduce has become kind of redundant, because there have been other frameworks which perform better than MapReduce algorithms also. Like we have parallel processing frameworks like Spark. There has been again a significant improvement in the computing hardware itself. So now you see, like you have these GPUs, big GPUs, which have these huge cores, which can do 100 times faster processing than the CPUs which you have used even just 1 year or 2 years back. All right. So all of these factors have contributed to the exponential rise in not only just the volume of data, but the ability to use the data. So the ability to use the data, to transfer the data from the source to the same to the database, to be able to analyze the data, all of these have contributed towards it. All right. So now we have talked about okay, we have large data, and this term has been coined somewhere around 2005, which is called as big data. And with big data, the most important technology which was very popular is Hadoop. That is in fact the first technology which coined this term called as big data. And people started thinking in terms of not only just having a data, but how to handle big data. So there needs to be a different approach to handling big data compared to a normal data. All right. So discussing about what type of data we could have. So obviously we are already aware about structured data. So in terms of structured data, obviously you can have any data which could be represented in the form of sensor, in the form of a structured table where you can have rows and columns, that can be called as a structured data. But what structured data and unstructured data is in fact one of the bigger problems and one of the bigger resource today. So most of the companies are relying on this unstructured data to find out insights. And if as a machine learning or data scientist, you or yourself might be working on a lot of maybe images data or text data. All right. So different types. So this unstructured data needs a different approach. So you need to think about this also, like what type of data you have. So if you have unstructured data, how you can store, like how you can go about storing unstructured data, how you can go about processing unstructured data. So unstructured data not only could be a text, and unstructured data could be a speech data also. Even sensors data could be unstructured. Like if you have thousands and thousands of sensors with at different frequencies, then it's again this data can also become unstructured. Images data could be an unstructured data. Image I usually consider not as a completely unstructured, but as a semi-structured data. If you have worked with computer vision problems, you will understand this. I'm not going to go into the details, but yeah, image can be classified as a semi-structured data. And again, similarly, videos can also be classified as a semi-structured data. All right. So we need to think about, as I said, like all of the problems like storing the data. Apart from storing the data, we also need to think about how to fetch the data. So fetching the data, which is popularly in data engineering world, is called as data ingestion. So we need to think about data ingestion, data storage, cleaning the data, processing, and analyzing. All right. Okay. Now, I wanted to give some insights in terms of the different kinds of databases which are available in the market. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of databases. So obviously you can have many other databases apart from what is listed on this slide. But anyways, we can start off with this and I can have your ideas. What do you think? So the aim here was to try to segregate different types of data and give you a knowledge. Like data is not just about Excel sheet, data is not just about structured data, and data is not just about structured and unstructured data. Data is a lot more than that, and your decision how to store data, how to process data is going to depend on a lot of factors. All right, so that is why I've bucketed it into 5 classes of databases. Now these are again not again an exhaustive list. You can have further classes also. All right. So the first very basic way of storing data is obviously you can store the data in form of raw files. So raw files means if you have a PDF document, just store the PDF document. If you have a text document, just store your text document. Obviously, it is a very inefficient way of storing the data. It is a very inefficient way of using the data. If you store the PDF file in the form of a PDF file, to use that data has become very, very difficult. All right. So like, I mean, you would be the data scientist or the modeling engineer, whoever is modeling that has to start from the scratch, from ingestion of the data till everything. So storing it in the file in it a raw file format is not an efficient way. but still there are companies and organizations which are still doing this. Same goes for Excel sheets also. So like although we say that like Excel sheets are kind of outdated, uh, if you ask anyone in the management, top management, they will say that we have completely eliminated Excel sheets. But still, in most of the top organizations, you will still find a lot of people still using Excel sheets. I'm not saying Excel sheets are bad. What I'm saying is Excel sheets are not a good way to store data. Excel sheets are not meant for that. But still find in a lot of organizations, in fact, even in my organization, I've worked with a lot of big organizations. I have seen that they still store this. They still store a lot of data set in Excel sheet format, which is not efficient. But since it is there, you will have to know those also. So you will also know not only just to interact with the latest technologies, which are like the fancy databases like Cassandra, MongoDB, and all. You'll also have to know and how to interact with the traditionary or the outdated databases or even Excel sheets also. Right? And when I say talk about Excel sheets, I'm not just talking about doing a pd.read CSV, because you will not be just connecting to an Excel through just like loading of the whole file, but maybe you will need some sort of Excel plugin where you can interact with the Excel sheet in the form of streaming. So although you have these technologies, these things also available in Excel, but although not recommended, but if it is there, it is there. So you will not have a choice. So it is always recommended that you also have that skill to work with that also. All right. Apart from Excel and files, which is inefficient, then comes the databases, which is obviously recommended, and databases will be there for many years. But what has changed in the last few years is the type of databases which we use. So traditionally, databases has been relational databases, which we popularly call as RDBMS systems. Now, RDBMS systems are basically those systems which are structured. So structured, whenever you have a data in the form of rows and columns, basically, you can obviously store it in a RDBMS system. And then there is a relation. If you have relations between multiple tables, you can do those. So you can write those queries, and a lot of data engineers come from this RDBMS background. All right. The other type of database is called non-relational database. Non-relational database is basically you can classify it in terms of the data which does not have a structure, or we call it as the data which does not have a schema. All right. So we also call it a schemaless. All right. So some examples of schema-less or non-structured databases is MongoDB, Cassandra. They're also called as NoSQL databases. So again, there is another database called as Elasticsearch that can also be included into the same bucket of NoSQL. But I usually bucket it into a different class, which is called as search engine-based database. I'll come to that in a moment. All right. There is another type of database which you will find, which is rare, not rare in terms of their usage, but rare that in a way that it has not been traditionally there, and you might not have heard about these databases if you're not actually from a data engineering background. So these are called time series databases. Now, although you can store a time series data in a relational database, that is, if you have, let's say, the temperature prediction. So if you have a data set of temperature of a room, so obviously you can store it in the form of two columns, where you have one column is the date and another column is the temperature, and you can obviously store it in a SQL table. But that is actually not recommended, and you will understand this once you actually work with this. Because if you do that, doing manipulation and analyzing the data becomes very difficult. Doing time slicing and all those are not actually efficient, and SQL is actually the SQL is not meant for that purpose. All right. So there are some databases which has been created specifically for time series. So if whenever you are working with a time series, and in your organization, if you think that you are dealing with a lot of sequential data, not exactly just time series data, sequential data where you can do slicing. So in that case, you should use some databases which are very made for very specific time series data sets. All right. And some of those data sets are databases are, I have named it here: InfluxDB, Druid, OpenTSDB. TSDB is not the name. The name is OpenTSDB. So these are some of the databases which are basically specifically generated or specifically made for handling time series data. All right. Similarly, I have another class of database which I call it a search engine based database. And now search engine based database is again, it can be included in the part of NoSQL or non-relational database. But why I have segregated is this is also kind of, it stores the data in the form of key pair relationships. It is also schema-less. It doesn't need a schema, but it stands out from a normal NoSQL database. It is different from a normal NoSQL database in a way because you can do searching within a particular field. What do I mean by this is, traditionally, if you, let's say if you're storing your data in SQL, and let's say if you're storing a name, age, and maybe income. So the name is, let's say, some name, Saurabh Ganguly, Sachin Tendulkar, and Rahul Dravid. All right. Now, you can obviously write a very simple query like, if name equals Saurabh Ganguly, then income you can find out using SQL. Select this where name equals this. All right. So you can definitely write these queries. Challenge comes when you want to find all the players whose first name is Rahul. So then you will need to write some in SQL. If you want to write, you will need to use the like statement. So select income where from this table where name like Rahul, something like that. You will need to write this. Now this becomes very inefficient in SQL. Now, it is actually highly inefficient in SQL. That is, if you want to search match not just with respect to the whole field but a subfield, that is within the field, then typically these type of databases, which I call it a search engine database, becomes very handy and becomes very useful. These two, the name which we have provided, Elasticsearch and Solr, are kind of the two most powerful search engine databases available. Elasticsearch, in fact, I would say that it dominates the whole market. Most of the uh, big companies are using Elasticsearch. LinkedIn uses Elasticsearch in their backend. Wikipedia uses Elasticsearch in the backend. So when you type something in Wikipedia, and it automatically gives you those results in a flash of seconds. All of these are powered by Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch in itself has been built by Apache on top of Apache Lucene. Lucene is the actually fastest search engine library available in the whole world. Anyways, another thing which I wanted to discuss, another category of database, which it is not actually a database, but still it is part of this whole data engineering pipeline. So that's why I call this a streaming database. Now, what is the meaning of this is, uh, whenever you are dealing with streaming data or high frequency data, where data is coming at a very high frequency and you need to store them. So imagine the scenario of again the sensors, where the sensors, accelerometer or gyroscope or magnetometer within your phone, or even the GPS is giving you data at 20 kilohertz, while you need to store. So 20 kilohertz means every second it is generating a 20,000 data points, and you need to store the 20,000 data point into the database. Now it might be entirely possible, it could be possible that your database itself takes more time to store 20,000. So maybe your database takes 4 seconds to dump those data of 20,000 samples into the database. So in that case, if directly you connect this streaming data into your database, it is not going to work. All right. So that is where we need something called what we call as streaming database, or it is also popularly called as message broker system. So two types of such systems are, very popular: RabbitMQ and Kafka. Apart from this, in AWS there is TimeStream, and then there are other examples also. All right. So just wanted to highlight this point. Now, depending on what you are dealing with, depending on what problem statement you are dealing with, depending on what is the kind of data you require, you will need to make these decisions for you. So as a data scientist, you will also have to, maybe you do not implement the complete architecture, but you will have to make these decisions in terms of like what kind of database you should use to store the data, what kind of, why. If you have, let's say, traditional data engineer in your organization, maybe he's a traditional data engineer who is dedicated for fetching data, but the data engineer's task is not to analyze the data. So if you just depend on the data engineer, that data engineer will say, okay, you have a streaming data, which is time series data. Good, go ahead, we'll store it in SQL. Because the data engineer is not worried about how you analyze the data. Data engineer is only worried about that if you need the data, data is there. The data is not lost. So that person is going to suggest you SQL because the person is more comfortable, has been working for years and years on SQL. Now you as a data scientist has to force your way and suggest to the top management that no, although you can store the time series data in your SQL database, but it is not going to be helpful. It will become very challenging to analyze the data. It will become very slow for me to consume the data for the analytics purpose. So unless you have the streaming knowledge, why it is different, why you need a dedicated, you will not be able to convince either the data engineer or the top manager to change this technology. So that is why you need to have this knowledge. So maybe you will not actually implement all of this, but you need to have this knowledge. That is why I wanted to discuss these things. All right. Similarly, if you have something like a text field, let's say if you have a data set like a news data set, all right, so you are fetching, you are scraping news articles from different websites and you are storing them. So again, the data engineer might suggest, okay, fine, let's just store it in a SQL where stored one column name is the title, another column name is the headline, another column name is the source, and another column name is the complete body. So the data engineer is good. Like you have, if you want the data, you will get it, but it will be very, very slow. If you're dealing with text data and if you're storing it in SQL, it is going to be extremely slow, because there you need some functionality. Like you want all of the news articles which contain mentions the name Donald Trump. Now, if you write this query in SQL, God knows how much time it will take. If your data is very, very large, let's say we are talking about millions of articles, something like that. So it might take maybe a couple of hours to just process your query. So there you need to suggest, like, since we need to do this, we need to store the data in better format, and we need to store the data in a different kind of database. So maybe you will suggest that let's go for Elasticsearch or let's go for Solar, because we need these kind of processing. Because in Elasticsearch we can write this query. Elasticsearch actually is really, really fast. If you do, if you have such text data where you need to search within a field, all right. So there you can write queries. Elasticsearch has its own domain specific language, and writing a query in Elasticsearch is very, very easy. Obviously, you will need to learn, but if you spend 2 days on Elasticsearch, you will become an expert of it. Now, why I'm saying this is because as a data scientist, this will become a part of it. At least these databases which I'm talking about, NoSQL, Elasticsearch, or maybe even MongoDB and Cassandra. All right. Okay. Fair enough. So now we have understood some types of databases, and we have understood the difference between the type of database. Now we have understood that not all databases are same. We have understood not all data types are same. So every data is different, and every data requires a different approach, all right, and different tools and technology. Each tools and technology has their own pros and cons. Each are meant to solve a particular type or store a particular type of problem or particular type of data. All right. So now the questions comes like, how do we go ahead? I mean, like, as a data scientist, how do we proceed? So it is said that, like, doing this activity of acquiring the data is as much art as it is a science. All right. So it's not just about knowing, having this knowledge. It will obviously come with practice and with experience. Once you know actually the real challenge, because right now I have explained you all of these things, that if you store data set like time series data in a SQL, you're going to face this problem. How do I know this? I know this from real world experience, because I've worked with. Because theoretically, if I actually don't have, sorry, too much knowledge about databases and all, theoretically I would say, like, yeah, it should work. Like, I can obviously store it in 2 columns. Why should it not work? All right. But when I actually really, when we actually work, when we actually go through it, then I face the real world, real challenge, and we find out that, okay, no, I mean, we do this, but then it becomes very, very slow for me. It is not meant for transactional part. If you need a data set for I have not discussed mentioned. In fact, there could be another category here, which is transactional database. Transactional database could be like, let's say if you're solving a problem, or if you're writing your code, and within your code you need some state. So state, like a variable which you need to save, or maybe like a model which has been trained, you want to store the state, like this model was trained on this date. So if you want to do this, which is, and you need to continuously connect to the data, fetch that transactional value, and again write something in the another field and do this. So these kind of transactional, again, these normal databases will not work. So you'll need to use some sort of transactional database there. All right. So this art comes with, I mean, these are some of the suggested methods which you can follow. Now it is not just about technical skills, that is having just the knowledge of which data to store where. It is also about having the business acumen. So business acumen means, uh, as I said, you are not only required, or you're not only concerned about storing the data and analyzing the data, you're also concerned about deciding or making the decision of what to store, which data to use. All right. So you will be the person who will be interacting with the business. You will be the person who will be interacting with the stakeholders and discussing, like, what is there in the data. You will be the person who will be discussing, like, what kind of data they have, which is useful, which is not useful. So you'll need to have this all this knowledge, and this will obviously come with experience. This will obviously comes with a lot of practice, because let's say if you're talking to a business and you're talking the business, most of the time you will see that the challenge is not scarcity of the data. Challenge is like having huge volumes of data or more data. So you actually need to decide which data to use, and you also need to decide which data not to use. So to have this knowledge, you obviously need some sort of experience and some sort of, so you'll need to do all these activities. You'll need to discuss with the stakeholders. You'll need to discuss in terms of their experience. You'll need to find out the business. You try to understand. When you discuss with the business, try to understand their process pipeline, like what do they do. So let's say we are talking about maybe automating some process. So maybe your organization have 20 persons working on a process manually. So let's say they work on Excel sheets, and you want to use data science to automate all of these processes. So to do this, first you will need to have to understand the whole process pipeline, like how manually they think. So let's say they are talking about they get a PDF, and from that PDF they search for a certain field, and then extract the name of companies from that PDF, and they manually type in a data entry, and they manually type in, it goes into a database. So this you want to you want to automate this process using data science, maybe using a deep learning based information retrieval system. But you can only do that if you first understand their process. So try to interact with the business as much as possible. Try to first understand how manually they think to they make this decision. Then this will give you an idea what sort of data you need to implement your model, what sort of database you should use to fetch those data and store those data, and what sort of models also you are going to use there. All right. Next question is, you need to build hypothesis. Now hypothesis building here is I'm not talking about the pure statistical terms. So I'm not talking about having a t-value and p-value. What I'm talking about is you need to have some sort of null hypothesis. Null hypothesis means basically what you want to achieve. So you need to first have this question like, okay, this is what I want to achieve. This is the problem which I want to solve. And my hypothesis is using this particular data is going to solve this particular problem, or this data is useful to predict this particular value. Now, once you have this hypothesis, you will need to do some sort of random experimentation or with subsample of the data. So maybe you will acquire all of the data, and then you do some sort of experimentation to narrow down like which data to use and which data not to use. Once you do that, then only you can go ahead and monitor and fetch the data. Because let's say if you have 10 types of data, you cannot first store all of the data in using all the technology, spend 2 months, and later on find out that out of the 10 data, only one of the data set was useful to you, the rest of the 9 was not useful to you. So you have spent that job, you have spent 2 months, or maybe not only your time but also maybe other people's time in fetching those other 9 data set which was not useful to you. So having this hypothesis, testing and validating this hypothesis is very, very critical and important for you before going ahead with the modeling process, or before going ahead with the data ingestion and database setup process. All right. Okay. Always remember, data is costly. So data doesn't come for free. And when I say this, we are not just talking about the cost of having the data, but we are also talking about cost of ingesting the data. Ingestion means transferring the data from the source to the sink, the cost of processing the data, and cost of also maintaining the data. Maintaining a database is also a very, very big task actually, and it's a costly process. Typically, you will always find database maintainers who are just required so that the data is always available to you. There is no failure there. There is no duplicacy in the data. The data is always clean. So there is a cost to this. All right. Now, there are two ways to do this, like maintaining this data set databases. Now, the traditional way has always been like you typically have data developers and data architects who would create this whole architecture and then also maintain this. And so you will always, if you go by that architecture, and 60% of the organization these days are still in that mode where they have their own database servers, they store their own database, and they have their own database maintainers. Now it comes at, obviously, since they are using their own server, so they don't have an additional cost of using cloud, but then there is an additional cost of having extra resources to maintain the databases. Now there has been a shift in this architecture in the last 2-3 years, where a lot of cloud providers are coming, and those cloud providers are providing something what we call as database as a service. So database as a service, we'll come to that slide and I'll give you some examples of database as a service. What it means is, the cloud provider tells that, okay, we have a database, and we are going to provide this database as a service to you. So you are only concerned about just getting the data and dump it into the database. Whenever you need it, you use it. Rest all of the task is for us. We will manage the database. We will see how much storage is required. We will see how to make it efficient. So this managing that, we will see that it doesn't have any downtime, or data is available all the time. So this database service is a new concept which has come in, but in the last 2-3 years it has actually become very, very popular, and a lot of people has been using. AWS has taken a lead in this segment, but apart from AWS, there are other providers like Azure also is providing these services. But yeah, right now I would say that AWS is still leading, and most of the in terms of most of database as a services. All right. So again, the idea here is to tell you that there is a cost to the data, not only just acquiring the data, maintaining the data, procuring the data, and using the data. So you'll always have to think in these terms also, because you cannot just think that data is always available. Data, I mean, this is also a part of your job, and you need to think like, okay, apart from the analysis, can I afford to have this data or not? If let's say if you're talking about billions of data, let's say we are talking about same sensor data, which is generating 20,000 samples per second. So let's say if you have a 1 year data which generates 20 billion points. All right. Now, as a data scientist, maybe 20 billion, storing that 20 billion, consuming that 20 billion points comes at a particular cost X. But let's say if you reduce that by 10 times, instead of storing 20 billion points, if you store only 2 billion points, let's say the cost reduces by X by 10. If that is the case, but as a data scientist, if you can test this hypothesis, like even if we reduce this by 10, my model doesn't affect much. That is, even if I get 20,000 samples in 1 second, or if I get only 10 samples per second, I don't care, because I'm not concerned about that much detail, because it is not going to affect my performance much. This insight coming in from you is going to help the whole architecture in a lot of way. That is, this is going to completely reduce the whole cost of procuring the data, storing the data. So you as a data scientist can provide this insights like which data is useful, which data is not useful. So we don't need to which data to store and which data not to store. So there again, your skills come in very, very handy. Okay. So now as I was discussing, like with data, storage of data comes a lot of problems. And as I said, like problems are not just related to storage, problems related to maintenance. If you need any changes in the architecture of the database, let's say you are storing data in a particular schema, but there is a requirement, you think you need to change the schema. So implementing those schema, maintaining this, monitoring it for failure, so that having a backup, taking backup every day or every hour whenever you think is necessary. If there is a failure, then restoring it from the backup. So all these becomes a problem, a part of this data engineering activity. But then, as I said, like a lot of people and a lot of organizations these days have been moving from this traditional architecture of doing all of these towards DBAS, which is database as a service. Okay. So I have mentioned some of the database as a service which are available. Now, these are all AWS services. I'm not advertising AWS, so I'm not saying AWS is good or AWS are bad. So I just wanted to give an example. That is why I've chosen AWS. But you can use AWS, Azure also. You can use IBM services also. All right. Now, to give you an example, I'll discuss a few of these services. Now, as I said, DBAS, what it means is you are talking about having a database in the cloud, but not worrying about maintaining that database, not worrying about the storage capacity, not worrying about that failure of the database, not worrying about backups. All right, that will all be taken care by the cloud provider itself. In this particular case, AWS. So that reduces the cost of maintaining the database, that reduces the extra cost of having an extra resource to do all these activities. But then again, obviously, it comes at higher cost compared to the traditional server level cost. So there is always a pros and cons to both of these things. But the upside here is the most, obviously, if you have your own server, it is a one-time investment. Since it is a one-time investment, once you have bought it, then it doesn't, you don't pay it for again and again. But if you are into this database as a service model, you pay it per use. Like every month you use, every month you are going to pay for it. All right. And the more storage you use, the more you are going to pay. So in some way it is good also, in some way it is bad also. Good in a way that I'm only going to pay what I'm using. So let's say, think about it in the way, like if you want to if you want to buy a new laptop for doing deep learning. So you are not really sure about what is the kind of laptop you need. Do you need a 50,000 laptop, or do you need a 3 lakhs laptop with GPU and all these things? All right. So you go ahead and invest 3 lakhs in a laptop, and later on you find out that most of you have a very NVIDIA Titan RTX 20 and 2080 Ti, and then you have 128 gigs of RAM, and then you have like 10 TB of hard disk, and all of this storage you have. All right. So you have invested in all this, and but later on, when you actually start working with your machine learning and deep learning problem, you find out that out of the 128 GB, most of the time you are only consuming 20 or 28 or 20, 30 gigabytes, not more than that. All right. If in the CPU part, you find out that you are never using more than 50% of the CPU. What happens there is, although you know that now the extra memory and extra CPU is not being utilized, you can't do anything about it. You have already invested the 3 lakh which you needed, which you might need not to invest it. All right. So the upside to this is you don't need to pay it again and again, but the downside is you are underutilizing the resource. So other model here is, instead of using this laptop, let's take a service of cloud provider. Like in Azure, we have Azure Compute. Similarly, in AWS, you have EC2. So rather, whenever I need to use a particular model, I create a virtual machine in AWS as EC2, and I create the part. I push the model into the AWS EC2, run the model till the time whenever I need to run. Once it is done, I close the machine. And let's say if I've used it for 2 days out of or maybe 20 hours out of 1 month, I'm only going to pay for 20 hours. So there, and if I need to even extend this, let's say if I have a 128 gigs machine, I want to add another 128 gigs, I can very easily do that. So that is the upside to using it as a service than compared to using it as a complete wholly owned servers. All right. Same goes for the databases also. So like if you are very sure about how much resource you have, if you are very sure about like exactly this is the storage which you need, this is the resource with the compute which you need, then having an in-house infrastructure, in-house database servers is actually cost effective. But if you're not sure, things keep on changing, and you think that you are going to expand, like this is in fact with startups, this usually happens, that startups estimate that maybe they are going to right now they are they need maybe 10 TB data or 100 TB data, but suddenly the startup becomes successful, becomes popular, and their customers increases, and suddenly there is a huge inrush, and then they are not able to maintain that data. So in that case, scaling it up vertically and horizontally becomes very easier in the cloud. All right. So again, the decision is yours. The decision is yours, or the technical architect or the database architect, whoever you are working with. But you need to consider these points.
Sajad, I just wanted to launch a quick poll. Can I take a few seconds?
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Guys, here's the poll. I have launched it on your screen, and I would like everyone to take this short poll. It's just a couple of questions. Please make it fast. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Sure. Okay. So as I was talking, you need to take
Thanks
this
for the short
decision.
poll.
Sure. Now coming to these different types of database service available in AWS specifically. So you have this Amazon Aurora. Aurora is basically for when if you're working with RDBMS system. Similarly, you have RDS. Similarly, you have Redshift. Redshift is basically a columnar database. Again, it is a RDBMS system, but if you have a data which you want to store as a columnar, there is again another debate on columnar versus row-wise storage. I'm not going to the detail. You can use Amazon Redshift. All right. Similarly, for NoSQL, it's kind of comparable. You can compare this DynamoDB with Cassandra or MongoDB. And similarly, AWS also provide, if you want to use Elasticsearch within AWS, they can also provide this as a service. And then they have Neptune for graph database. They have TimeStream for time series database, just comparable to your OpenTSDB or InfluxDB. So as you can see, like they have a kind of equivalent service to almost all of the type of databases which is required. So same goes for Azure, same goes for IBM also, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take there is this link to a blog post which you can read in your free time. This blog post actually mentions about the what are the different skill sets which is actually required for a data engineers. Data engineering skills required for a data scientist. Now, these are the same things which we have discussed throughout our session, but it is presented in a very nice, concisable way. So whenever you have time, do go through this blog post. I hope you will receive this presentation. I'll send it to Vijay. He will forward it to you guys.
Can you put the link
Now, what
into
we
the
are going
chat?
to do now is we are going to take a use case and we are going to discuss from that use case, and we'll try to understand the different aspects of data ingestion and data engineering, basically, like which
Excuse
is
me?
required from data scientist perspective. All right.
Excuse me?
So the use case which I have selected is predicting the movement of
Hello.
stock prices.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes. Is someone
Yeah.
asking anything?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you
Madhukar
please-
is trying to ask a question.
Yeah. Can you please
Sure,
put
sure,
the
go
link into the chat?
Yes, I will provide this link into the chat.
Yeah. So maybe we can immediately just parallel do it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Welcome. So you can go through this blog post. Now what I'm going to do now is basically take this use case, and the use case I have selected is, let's talk about predicting the movement of stocks. All right. Now this is the use case. Sounds like a data science problem because we want to predict what is going to be the index of Nifty maybe tomorrow. We want to predict what is the stock price going to be for Reliance maybe 6 months afterwards. So these kind of activity. All right. So this is the task here. Now let's hear it from you. How would you approach this problem? Now you know the problem statement. Problem statement is I want to predict the stock prices at a future time, obviously based on the past data. All right. Now, what are the things which you should consider while solving this problem? Now, very simple thing which comes to our mind is obviously we will implement some sort of time series modeling because it looks like a time series data. But that is not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is in terms of the architecture, whole architecture. How, as a data scientist, what do you think is useful? So let's say if you work for the organization says that we want to do this. Now the organization tells us that they want to do this. You need to decide everything. So let's say you are the project lead and you need to decide everything, means which data to consume, where to get that data, everything you need to decide. All right. So let's hear it from you guys. Like, how do you start? What are the things which comes to your mind as a project leader? What are the first thing which you should do? So go ahead. Anyone having any comments? So the task is predicting the movement of stocks. And what I want to understand from you guys is like, what is the first thing which comes to your mind? What do you want to achieve here? Like, what will you start as a first? Yes, go ahead.
Identifying the drivers of the movement. For example, price, volume, industry, like that. So shortlisting the variables which are driving this thing.
Sure. So the first thing which you said is shortlisting of the variables, that what are the data which you want to consume. And you have mentioned something like a volume, the price, and price. All right. So good, fair enough, good enough point. Like we need the market data, or basically the stock price data. So very well said. Do you think we need any other types of data? Does anybody think that apart from the stock market data, which is the prices data of Reliance or Nifty, do we need any other data to solve this problem?
I think some exceptional event, let's say, for example, a Corona declaration into a day. So event which has a maximum impact.
Great, right? So we now here
There
comes
are also
the problem
time series events.
News data
so
points.
Yes,
Yeah, news
data points. Yes, so
Yeah,
you want to capture events. So I can say that I also want to capture the news data points. All right, fair enough. Any other data? Someone said, Vijay says GDP. Great point. The stock prices are obviously affected by GDP also. I would generalize this and I would call it as economic factors. So you also need data is related to the economic conditions of the country and the economic conditions globally. So whether we are right now what is the GDP, what is the different things like repo rate of RBI. These are the things also which can affect a particular. All right. Ramesh says special occasions. Yes, correct. Special occasions can affect. So special occasions like, let's say we are talking about Diwali, we are talking about maybe some different things. We are talking about decision on behalf of a company to merge with another company or splitting of a stock. So these can also affect mergers, acquisitions. Great. So see now since we are discussing, now you can see that there are so many points coming that stock market prediction is actually not just limited to stock data. It is actually includes a lot of other data sets also. Great.
It's
Anything else you
also
think
linked to political
could be relevant
situation.
here?
Political situation.
Very great. Linked to political situation. I can consider this include. I can include this in within the maybe news data, because maybe we want to capture, but we can reframe it also in terms of another data set which where we can structure this political situation. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So this is what we want to do. Now, these are some of the questions which we wanted to capture. All right. So employee satisfaction. Yeah. So again, employee satisfaction, it's difficult to measure. So it's easier to say that we need this data, but you not only just need to think about like we need this data, you also need to think which data is actually available. Is it possible to capture employee satisfaction of Reliance? Is it possible for as me as an outsider who wants to trade, purchase Reliance stock? Can I get employee satisfaction review? It can very fair enough. So maybe yes, correct. So let's say you talk about Glassdoor. So maybe Glassdoor gives us some idea. So you need to think about it. So yes, it's again becomes a very great point that maybe you do a scraping of different these websites like Glassdoor or Naukri, where you can find out these reviews about different customer satisfactions, which can give you some idea in terms. Good. So we need to think about. So this was my idea. That is, I wanted you to think on this aspect. That we need to think about what data to collect. We need to think about the characteristics of the data, not only what data to collect. So we have just seen that, okay, we need news data, we need stock market data, but all of these data, do you think it's of different time series data? We just saw news data, it is different. News data is not a time series data, it's an unstructured data. Similarly, we can have data sets like you said GDP, maybe it could be presented in the form of a table. So we also have a structured data also. So you can see for the same problem statements, we have multiple types, multiple characteristics of the data. So the data engineering aspect also will depend on the different characteristics of the data. So you'll have to think accordingly that. All right. So we need to think about the characteristics of the data. We need to think how to fetch the data. All right. We need to think how to store the data. Can we store all of this data simultaneously in a single database? So we need to think about that.
One more
Even
thing
once
we
you have
missed
this
it.
data, how do we clean this data? So obviously this data has a lot of noise. So particularly, let's say if we data, pardon me.
Yeah, I wanted to just say, yeah, when you said use case, predict movement of stock prices. I think we will probably
Yes.
also need, when we are discussing all these points, it recollected that we also need a windows, how much window we want to predict. Is it hour or is it day?
Absolutely.
You know, that will also decide on
Correct.
this
So
things. Thank you.
absolutely. So we also need to decide whether we are doing a short-term prediction or long-term prediction. Are we talking about intraday trading or intraday trading? So are we talking about predicting within a day, or are we talking about predicting for next 6 months or next 1 year? So that is obviously going to decide this process. So there are some companies who are intraday traders, like they talk about individual day. So for intraday trader, maybe GDP is not a big factor because GDP doesn't change every day. So, but for them, real-time events like news data is very, very important. So if I want to trade now and sell after 1 hour, for me, what is important is the prices and maybe the events and maybe something related to social media. Maybe Modi statements by the finance minister or finance minister. So those are important for me. So yes, the window size which we want to predict is also going to affect this data collection process. And very well said that actually, if you are doing an intraday prediction, maybe we might not need some of the data sets. So you as a data scientist can suggest that we don't need this data set, so we can save the cost there. Okay. Similarly, we also need to think about data augmentation. So what is data augmentation? Again, data augmentation is at times, although the data which we fetch is not the exact data which we actually use. We try to enrich the features. Like, let's say if you're talking about news data, we not only just store the raw data, we try to maybe write some code, do some ETL to extract the headlines out of news and store it separately. Similarly, we try to extract the date time from the news article. We try to extract the author who has written the news. Now it is unstructured data. Obviously, you need to do some sort of write some sort of code to do these activities, but you are actually enriching the database. So the data which came in the raw format, you are augmenting the data to enrich the data to create more features, which will become later useful for you in the modeling process. And then you obviously perform the EDA analysis and modeling part. All right. So I'm not concerned right now. Obviously, this analysis, modeling, testing, deployment, these are obviously a part of your data as science job as a data scientist. And obviously, today's discussion is not focused on that. Today's discussion is focused on the data part, where we're talking about how to collect the data, how to fetch the data, how to store the data, and augmentation, and the real-time architecture. So real-time architecture, what real-time architecture means is, let's say you're not only concerned about that having this data and storing this data, you will also need to think how it will work in real time. So let's say even if the stock market, if we take the same problem statements, okay, fine, you will collect the data will be, just hold a second now. Yeah, sorry. We can continue. All right. Sorry, I had muted myself. Let's continue. I had an important call. I apologize for the inconvenience. So anyways, so what we are talking about is, we are talking about the different types of activities which we need in terms of data, having fetching the data. And for these, all of these, let's see. Now we have talked about all of this data, that we need this market data of stocks, we need the economic data. Similarly, we need news data. Another thing could be the social media data. Like, you might think that maybe something like a Twitter might be useful for you, like tracking maybe statements by different people on Twitter, maybe this statement by the finance minister, statement by RBI governor. So even doing some sort of sentiment score using the Twitter data could also be useful to you. So as you can see, all of these data are different types of data. There could be some index providers also. There are like some companies, like you have psych indices, which provide psych signals, which provides different scores to different buzzwords. Like, this company is more popular these days, this is trending, this is not trending. So that could also be important. All right. Now, in terms of collection of the data, if we talk about these sources, which we have discussed right now, as you now have discussed, that all of these sources are different types, so there are different characteristics. So we need to think in terms of each individual data and the characteristic of each individual data, how to store them, how to collect them. All right. So like for the market data, obviously since it's time series data, so probably it will come through an API. So you will need to think how to connect to an API. So you need to have an architecture where you can connect through an API and dump the data wherever you want to store. Similarly, the economic data, if it is structure, you maybe it is available in the form of FTP, or you need to do a web scraping on some government website and you are scraping the data from there. Similarly, news data can come in from an API, FTP, or as a streaming data. So if it is a streaming data, then you will need to include a streaming architecture there. Same goes for social media and index provider also, depending on the source. It could be an FTP, it could be through an API also. And if I talk about individually storing each of these, so again, depending on different characteristics, as you can see, you might need to implement different types of storage. So maybe for the market data, which is a time series database, you might need to use OpenTSDB, or if you're working within AWS, maybe you will need time stream, or maybe you can use InfluxDB or Druid. All right. So these are not the architecture which I'm suggesting that you should use. This is one of the probable use case, probable technologies which you can use. All right. Not mandatory. So I'm just giving an example. So similarly for maybe economic data, since it is relational data or structured data, I can store it in SQL or Redshift, something like that. Same goes for news data. Since within news, I might need to do some sort of search queries. So maybe I'll need Elasticsearch, because Elasticsearch is meant for these kind of databases. Same goes for social media data, and for index provider, again, I can store it in SQL.
Excuse me,
So
I have one question.
basically what the message, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. For example, we create one data which we store economic data into RDBMS in SQL.
Yes.
We have news data which is stored into a NoSQL, news data and
Yeah.
social data. Now,
Yeah.
is it possible that I have some sort of a software or something that I can relate it? I can build relationship between the data. For example, economic data, I have a industry-wise GDP.
Yeah.
Now that industry, I want to connect to all those companies for which I have no SQL data.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
So
I
yes,
can connect to
yes.
SQL and no SQL databases. I want to build a relationship into that.
Yes,
Can I do?
absolutely. You can do that. That is where the processing layer will come in. So processing layer, what a processing layer means is, in the processing layer, they are different. We are not
Your voice is breaking.
connect to the database.
Voice is breaking.
You need
Please
to have
repeat.
is it? Okay.
Please repeat it. Voice is breaking.
Is it better? Is it better now?
Little.
Okay, give me a second. Let me connect.
We cannot hear you now.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it is much better now. So my question is,
Okay.
we have three type of databases. One is time series, one is RDBMS, and one is NoSQL. Is there a way we can build relationship amongst these databases so that when we retrieve from all these three different type of heterogeneous databases, we have one uniform picture of a data set?
Yes, absolutely, we can do that. So what we will need to do is basically in that particular case, you will need to come up with, just hold on 1 second. I'm really sorry, I'm receiving a very important call. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm really sorry, I got a really important call. But anyways, coming to your point,
It's okay.
it's actually a very important question, and it's actually very relevant. The idea is, whenever you want to connect to multiple different types of databases, obviously you cannot do within a particular database. So what you will need to do is, you will need to use a separate layer. Separate layer means you will need to use some sort of processing layer. So there, something like Spark will come in very, very handy to you. The Spark can, so you need a processing framework which can connect to both types of databases. So Spark can connect to Elasticsearch, Spark can connect to a time series database, Spark can connect to a SQL also. Now within that Spark, it is kind of, you can think of Spark itself stores the data temporarily in memory. So in memory means it will need a RAM. So there you can connect to the databases, fetch the data and do a comparison. So you cannot do direct database calculation, that is Elasticsearch to SQL. You cannot directly compare. What you will do is, you will be having an intermediary layer, maybe for using Spark, and Spark will connect to Elasticsearch also, Spark will connect to SQL also, and there is where you are going to do this comparison. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. Other than Spark, any other things?
Other than Spark, you can use MapReduce, but apart from that, I'm not really sure right now any other frameworks which you can use. In Python, typically you can use for if you want. Why I mentioned Spark is obviously you can use a lot of other frameworks also. Like you can use Dask also, but Spark. I mean, if you're dealing with like large data sets, then Spark might come in lot handy in terms of faster. But there could be other technologies also which you can use.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. All right. So this, I think this is it, which I wanted to discuss from my end. Now I would like to have some questions from your side. I hope you understood whatever we have discussed. And as I said, the idea was not to go into the complete technical details of each technologies. I've still tried to share my whole experience in terms of what I've worked with. The idea was to give you an insight into like why data is important, what are the different aspects which you should consider while making these decisions, and what are the things which you should consider here. All right, so like it's not just about having a data, it is also about thinking about acquiring the data, it's also about thinking of processing the data, it's also about thinking about storing the data. The characteristics of the data also comes into play here. All right, okay, fair enough. So any queries, please go ahead.
I
Please
missed
wait,
your-
after questions. Yeah.
I missed few earlier slides of yours. Can you please start the first one or two slides of the earlier? The first two
So
slides
you
or three
want me
slides.
to go to the first slide? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed. I was a bit late, so I missed probably first or one or two slides.
Okay. So in the beginning, I was just discussing about why do we need data? Why does data scientists actually need to have data engineering skills? And we discussed like since data scientist job is also to work with the data, and not a lot of times a dedicated data engineer is going to be available for you. So that is why you will need to have this data engineering skills also with you, where we can actually connect to a database. You also need to think about the different aspects, like which data to use, which data not to use. So even if you have a data engineer at your disposal, you still can suggest in terms of architecture that this is the data which we want to use. This is data more useful to use. This will help us in faster analysis which I'm going to do. So if the data engineer and data scientists work side by side and they understand the common term, the overall pipelines becomes a lot more useful, a lot more less redundant compared to if the data engineers work on their own and the data scientists work on their own. So that is more or less what we have discussed in the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sajad, a couple of questions and
Sure, go ahead.
Via chat. You can just have a look at the chat. One is from Yagna and one is from Vijay. Ramesh is also asking.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at this. So any example of data pipeline, please? So what do you actually want to ask me from data pipeline? So data pipeline is basically the whole overall complete pipeline, like starting from the ingestion of the data till the analysis. So this becomes the whole pipeline. Now you take any example, let's say even if the example which I showed, that also becomes a complete data pipeline. That is fetching the data using maybe some sort of API, then storing the data in the different databases, and maybe if you have a streaming data, use Kafka as an intermediary layer, then maybe Redshift to store the time series data and process that data using some scheduler or maybe batch-wise processing or Spark for parallel processing. This becomes one data pipeline. So it's a very generic term. I'm really not sure exactly if you have any specific thing which you wanted to know within this. Vijay asks, what are the typical sources of data for any analysis apart from Kaggle? There are tons and tons of sources of data sets which are actually quite similar to real world problems. If specifically you want to work with text data, there is a repository called as Big Bad, I think something called as Big Bad NLP dataset. Similarly, for images, if you want to work in the computer vision world, again there are lots of datasets available in ImageNet. I think I forgot the name of the website. What I can do is I can compile a list of such repositories where you can find a lot of real world data sets, and obviously you can have a look at it. And if you have any confusion, or even if you want to have further discussion on those sources, I'm always ready. Do drop me an email or a LinkedIn whenever I get them. I'll definitely revert back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Absolutely. Last question I'm going to take, which is I'm going to transition from data science, which part I need to consider. Okay, fair enough. So if you are going to do a transition, again, this is a very generic question and a lot of people ask these questions. What I'll suggest you is if you're not not from a technical background, first focus on the data science skill aspects, that is focused on programming, which is Python programming or R programming, whichever you prefer. Focus then once you're done, once you're very efficient with the programming, focus on the concepts part, which is the model, statistical concepts, mathematical concepts behind those algorithms, and try to implement this. Once you think that you are more or less maybe even at 70% at the modeling and machine learning skills, side by side, don't wait to be a complete expert in deep learning and then starts with other skills. Once you feel that you are at least able to write models, create models, and do some solve your problems, solve your modeling problems, side by side start with the other software engineering skills. And what by other software engineering skills, basic, at least in the basics, what you should have is model deployment. So deployment means once you create a model, how do you convert that model into a usable model? So maybe learn a little bit about API, maybe Flask, learn a little bit about Dockers and containers. How Docker, they're very the things which I'm recommending are actually very easy to use. They're very simple to use. So learn about Flask, learn about Dockers and containers, and some sort of data engineering. At least learn about some of the very basic databases. Like obviously you will need to learn SQL. So not be is not what I'm recommending, but you should not be at a stage where someone tells you like we have two tables and I want to do a join with this table. You don't know how to write a query. Do a outer join, inner join, these kind of thing. Similarly, learn a little bit about NoSQL database. Maybe MongoDB and Elasticsearch might do the job for you to start off with. And if you think that you are in an organization which consumes a lot of time series data, then do learn about at least one of the time series data, which is like OpenTSDB or the Druid or whichever your organization uses. All right. So that is what my recommendation would be. Okay, all right, guys. I think I hope that it was a helpful session. I'll close with that. Again, as I repeated, if you have any further queries or even if you want to have further discussion, do drop me an email or a message on LinkedIn. I will revert whenever I have time. All right.
Sajad, I think
Yes.
you have solved Yagna's query, but he just pinged that he meant data pipeline architecture in real world project. If you can just have a look, we can close after that.
Can you just repeat what did you say? Data pipeline architecture?
Yeah, so he said first he asked for data pipeline, but that you explained. Then he just pinged saying I meant data pipeline architecture in real world project.
So data pipeline architecture is again the whole architecture of having. Let me explain using this example. So if you recall, in our example also I suggested that this is the architecture with ending. So let's look at this second slide. That is the bottom part. Now here you can see since we need all of this data, we need an data ingestion mechanism. So ingestion mechanism, maybe if you're using an API, so there will be an API. API will give the data to a Kafka. Kafka will be store the data temporarily and then it will dump to a TSDB. There will be some ETL jobs which will be written which might do some sort of conversions to this data, maybe an undersampling here or duplicacy removal here or maybe filling of misvalues, and then it will go and dump into the open. This could be one of the data pipeline architecture I can recommend very simply. Depending on what, like in this particular case, you can see that there is a complex set of databases, complex set of technologies. So for each of them, there will be the whole pipeline will be complex. But yeah, I mean, like taking this prime example where you have a data ingestion mechanism, data collection layer, then you have this message broker system like Kafka, and then which dumps into OpenTSD, and maybe some data cleaning also here. So some ETL job which does cleaning, like maybe filling of missing values, duplicacy removal, and all those. This becomes one data pipeline architecture.
Thanks, Ajat. I think we are done. Thanks for the wonderful session. Thank you guys for joining on time, giving your time on Sunday. Thanks, Ajat. The session was really good. And I think we are done. Right, Ajat? Anything else?
All right.
Cool.
No, that would be all from my side. All right, guys.
Thanks a
Okay,
lot.
guys.
I'm
Thanks.
ending the
Bye. Have
meeting.
a nice day.
Yeah. Bye,
Sure.
Sajjad. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Please fill the feedback form. It would be great if you can fill the feedback form. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Yeah, I'll be sharing the deck and the recording as always. You'll find the session on platform. I'll also share the deck on Slack. So it shouldn't be a problem.